Welcome back to Digging Deeper. We're back with a very, very special guest and one that's pretty special. But we have, for the first time ever, a client on the call with us, Joey Smith. And we'll introduce him a little bit later. But today, we are talking about quick tips for creating efficiencies at your fleet. Boo-doo-doo.
Hello and welcome to tonight's show.
First things first, we have a return guest with us, one of the most popular guests we've ever had on Digging Deeper, Scott Maldonado. Scott, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, give us your title and a little bit of your history, your experience within the realm of trucking.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Don't know what my title is. I know what my name is. My name is Scott Maldonado, and I work with carriers across the nation. Many of the folks watching and listening in, I've had the pleasure of working with them inside their office. I work with their operations teams. I work with their recruiting teams. And I've spent the last, I want to say 30 years, 29 years in trucking. I started back in 1996 after the military, and here I am today.
And I've personally read more glowing reviews of Scott Maldonado's mentoring program than I think I've ever read of any program. So very, very good at what he does. And then finally, the special guest that I mentioned, we have today with us, Joey Smith. Joey, why don't you tell us just a quick bio of who you are, where you work, and what you do?
Well, first, thanks for having me. Like I said, Joey Smith, Operations Planning Manager with Jordan Carriers in Natchez, Mississippi. Been in transportation pretty much my whole life, transportation inside the military and outside the military. I've held just about every role from Director of Safety, Recruiting, HR, Operations, and it all boils down to one thing. We're here to service our drivers and make the drivers the best in our industry.
All right, so long story short, we've got two highly qualified experts with us to talk about what we were talking about today, which I said in the intro, scratching my back there. That's going to look great on film. Two highly sought after experts to talk about quick tips for creating efficiencies at your fleet. So the goal of today is we want to move through three big departments at a fleet and talk about what are the things that you could be doing, kind of the low hanging fruit. Maybe not easy, but it's the most obvious things that you could be doing to create more efficiency, more operating efficiency, maybe creating a better operating ratio at your fleet. I had to create an outline to make sure that I understood everything that was going on here. But before we move into any specific department, I noticed that there was a theme that stretched across every single department. Scott, I noticed that you put this next to everything. And I want you to go into it a little bit because I think it's very important. So I would say for every department, and we'll probably reiterate this idea every time we talk about a new department. Why don't you go ahead and talk about that for about 2 minutes, Scott? Go.
Absolutely. So what I mentioned on what you sent out was it's important to build a synchronized leadership team. Now people can read, you've read about it before, a cohesive team, a great team, but whether it's trucking, recruiting, operations, whether it's sports, you have to have a synchronized leadership team that is all pushing the same direction. I know that sounds cliche, but it's real. Whether it's recruiting and operations and maintenance, safety, we all have to be pushing that same exact direction. And we all have to believe in each other as leaders. It's common. Or let me share this. It's some of the most successful carriers that I work with out there have done a great job at this. And what that means is their leadership team, they'll have a meeting, and they don't have that second meeting that other ones do have.
Yeah.
That second meeting is out there by the coffee pot.
Right, where they say what they really think.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let me kick it over to Joey. So I know you probably have some good thoughts on this, but you've been in leadership at a ton of, for a long time and probably in different departments. How important is it that the leadership across departments have a clear vision and that they're all pulling in the same direction?
It's the difference between being successful and outlasting and closing the doors. If if you're not all having the same voice with the same mission, you're doomed from the start. Scott brought up that second meeting. Those second meetings that undermine the one voice and the one mission, destroy everything. And that's a complete undermining of what the intent of the mission is.
I really like what you did there, because it's like it seems like a kind of a lofty, abstract idea of like be synchronized. But what you both kind of did was say, no, if you're on the same page, there's huge revenue implications for how your company functions. This isn't just it's a nice culture thing, though it is a huge culture thing, but it's a cornerstone of actually driving efficiency at your fleet. All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump. If you guys are ready, everybody ready? Let's jump into a specific department and talk about what are kind of your easy ways to create efficiency inside of each department. First one, and I think the one that I'm most familiar with, but you guys probably have as much familiarity with all of this, recruiting. Let's talk about recruiting, and maybe we can start with individual recruiters inside of there. What are the easiest ways to create efficiency inside of a recruiting department? And anybody can go first if they want to.
So individually, when it comes down to the recruiter level, it's important for the recruiter to have a good understanding, not just the basics, but a good understanding of what goes on in orientation, in driver management, tractor assignment, dispatch planning, customer service, the shop maintenance, for them to truly understand what happens on once they leave recruiting.
Yeah.
And the reason being is they could actually speak to the driver. You want to speak and connect to that driver and be confident in what you're talking about.
Well, and you have to have talked to more recruiters than any person in the world. That might be true. Well, at least in trucking, you may have talked to more recruiters than any person in all of trucking. Is that a common occurrence that recruiters understand the entire life cycle, we'll say?
You know, it is with the successful trucking companies.
Okay, there you go.
It is with the successful companies, and you can feel it when you walk in their room. When you walk in the office of a recruiting department that is synchronized, right? The energy level is just amazing. Music playing, people are standing up, they're laughing, they're not afraid to speak, their heads aren't down.
Yeah.
They're up and you can just feel it.
All right, Joey, I'll throw it over to you. As far as on the recruiter level, what would you say if you were someone to say, give me a quick tip to create more efficiency with recruiters? What would you say?
Recruiters staying involved with operations, not being afraid to pick up a phone and say, hey, where are we short right now?
Yeah.
Are we still needing drivers in this area? Are we overfilled in this area? Are we still doing this in this area? Are we short and dedicated over here? Not being afraid to pick up the phone and not call just a leadership member, but frontline people, the fleet managers, staying engaged with them, talking about their drivers, getting feedback, what the drivers are telling them.
Yeah.
So really tell what the company is doing as a whole. They have that finger on the pulse. So staying in touch with the pulse of operations is a must.
What is the downside? What does that look like? You kind of said what the upside of that is. What's the downside when they're not in good communication? What happens from maybe a driver experience standpoint, or maybe even just the operating ratio and efficiency of the fleet?
Well, you get bogged down in the not knowing, and then you're guessing, and then right there from the beginning, one of the things that drive everything is trust. So if we're going to have revenue, we're going to have trust. Right. And if recruiters are saying, hey, we need go to this area and we're gonna put you in dedicated, and dedicated is already booked up, and they're guessing instead of actually going through with the knowledge and factual information, that is a detriment from the start. And then we bring people on and then we lose them during orientation because they feel they were lied to. So what cost are we losing? Yeah, hey, we had a great orientation class. It was 30 people that showed up. 10 graduated because 20 left because they felt that they were not given all the facts, they were lied to. And you know how quickly a driver that feels that something was less than honest with them, how quickly they'll leave. So, we got to have that trust. And the only way to have that is that constant communication. So the upside we already talked about, but the downside is horrendous when you just play a guessing game instead of staying in that constant communication.
And I wrote that down. You said trust equals revenue, and I wrote that down because I'm going to use that and steal it. I hope you're okay with that.
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
I'll tell you, let me touch on that if I could.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for sharing what you did, Joey. It's exciting to see when carriers are doing this, when they have the actual recruiter role play and pitch operations, where they actually do this weekly and the recruiters role play and pitch operations. And because they're synchronized, operations can actually coach recruiting. And what you see there is you see a team that starts to work together the same direction. So that's one way to actually help build that synchronized team. Another would is to have some of them have the actual shared drives out there where they're updating the information on lanes live, and the recruiters can view that. They're not waiting for messages to come through weekly meetings.
All right. And this is all great stuff. Great stuff. Let me ask you this way. Let's say you're talking to a director of recruiting. So he's more the director role, and he's got 2 minutes of your time. And he says, man, I'm new to this. Tell me in 2 minutes, what's the most important thing that I should be focused on as a director of recruiting? What would you tell him? Maybe let's start with Joey this time. What would you tell him?
I'm going to go back to my trust factor. Do not lie. Do not accept any lies from your recruiters, and never, ever lie. If you don't know something, find it out.
I love it. Yeah, that's the big thing. Even within my job, when you first start and you're scared to admit you don't know something, it's always better just to ask the question. Ask the question. It's like, people are willing to help. Ask the question. All right, same question to you.
Absolutely. When I'm sharing with a new VP or director of recruiting, I touch on there's the IQ of recruiting, trucking IQ or recruiting IQ, which is understanding 10th Street, PSPs, MVRs, but focus more on the I care skill set of recruiters, the compassion, the active listening, right? The conflict resolution, the emotional intelligence. Practice coaching your team on those skill sets that are hard to measure, right? Before you start focusing on the ones that are easy to measure.
We had Emily Gordon on for listening in, our senior vice president of RPO, and she, 30 plus years in recruiting, almost the same exact answer of, it comes down to that idea of I care. Like, do you actually care about the person you're talking to? Can you find the humanity in every single driver you get on the phone? All right, that was great, and that was a lot of golden stuff, but we got to move on to operations now. So now we're on to the operations department, and this is where I lose a little bit of my knowledge, but I got two of the best with me. All right, operations. Scott, why don't you start this time? Same sort of question. Where are my easy wins, or maybe what are the most important things I should be focused on in operations?
In operations, I'm going to go back to the building a synchronized leadership team in operations as well. Mm-hmm. So whether you have your VP of operations, your operations managers, your team leads, they have to be synchronized, right? Along with that is also financial transparency. And what I come with that, and what I'm sharing there is the P&L, profit and loss statement. Right. Understanding what an operating ratio is, what a profit and loss statement is, and how each department impacted. And then that water has to hit the end of the road, which means driver leaders and CSRs and planners all should understand or be coached on how they impact that operating ratio. Yeah,
and I don't want to hide the ball here. I have an outline that I'm kind of working through, but that's one thing you wrote down here is that you want to educate everyone on a P&L and operation ratio. Everyone needs to understand how they contribute to that.
Absolutely. Now, I won't throw the name out there. There's a mega carry out there right now that everyone from the driver manager up here to the CEO, they understand the P&L. Mm-hmm. They understand the line items from office supplies, maintenance, tires, on-road repairs, and how they impact that.
All right, let's kick it over to Joey. Joey, same question to you. A general question for all of operations, top thing that you should be concerned about, or maybe what's a quick, easy way to create efficiency, whatever direction you want to take it. You go ahead.
Well, revenue is what makes the world go round. Scott mentioned, a carrier out there that from the the fleet manager, the CEO knows everything about that P&L.
Mhm.
That's something that every carrier should strive for. When your fleet manager impacts that P&L just as much as decisions that leadership teams make. When the fleet manager decides, hey, it's okay for the driver to take this load on Wednesday and deliver on Monday, how did that impact the OR? What's that going to happen to utilization now on that truck? How do our decisions impact what we do? Now we have to take care of our drivers. Our drivers have lives, they have families, they have appointments, all those things, but we also have to plan accordingly. So understanding how our decisions impacts that revenue goes back to a statement I said at the very beginning that you wrote down: trust equals revenue. So we have to trust each other enough to know the decisions that we're making are in the best interest of the company, and the company has the best interest of each employee in mind. So having that care, but more importantly, just having that knowledge.
Yeah.
If I could just share, one thing that comes to mind on this, I always implied something. I don't know if you've ever heard of the acronym SKIP, SKIPP, but it's something that I've always employed with my teams. And SKIP just simply for safety, knowledge, integrity, profit, then people. Or I'm sorry, people, then profit. If you have safety, knowledge, integrity, and put your people first, profit's always going to be there.
Wrote that one down too, but I'll give you credit on that one. The other one, I'm just going to steal and claim it.
No problem. I'm sure I acquired both of those over time from other as well.
I'm just going to be in a meeting in a couple of days, be like, it's like I always say, trust equals revenue. It's just something I've always said.
Something I always believe strongly about. Let me share one thing with you. Over the weekend, I was excited to be on here and to share a little bit about operations. That's my background and where I came from. I sent a text message to 4 executives, and they'll be watching this: president of a company, a CEO, a president, a COO, mega carriers, big carriers. And I sent them a text message on that Sunday, and I said, here's what we're going to be talking about. What do you feel are some of the things that folks do well to overcome some of our challenges in trucking?
Mm-hmm.
I compiled all their responses, and it was amazing to see them all say values, vision, and mission.
Yeah.
So the values of the people is important. The vision, direction you're going, and your mission statement. Why we do what we do. So that really stuck home, and again, we always had our values and visions and mission statements and posters on the walls, and we think, hey, that's going to cure the world. But truly, what are you value? What do you value?
Well, that's very, very good. I see you wrote another thing down here that I want to ask you both about. You said it's very important from an operational standpoint that you understand the metrics that matter most. So I want to ask both of you if you could tell me maybe 3, maybe 2, whatever you are comfortable sharing. What are the metrics that matter most, and what are those, and how do you track them? I guess would be a better way to say it. Maybe not. I don't know. Just give me the metrics that matter most.
On our end, truck utilization, out of route variance are 2 that we try to focus on, and we've been focused on more as of late. Because those are the easy things to, again, that utilization. How do we make the decisions? Did we have a truck setting longer than it needed to be setting?
Right.
Could we have powered this load? Could we have done different things? So tracking that along with, do I keep this driver out, or do I authorize an extra 100 miles out of route? How does that impact what our overall revenue of that load was? Yeah. So our fleet managers understanding just those 2 when they didn't understand them at all to begin with before. Yeah. Is having that slowly tick up.
That's good. That's good. Over to you, Scott. What would you say are the metrics that matter most from an operational standpoint?
Absolutely. I'll give you a few of them. The revenue per truck per day, that's an important one, along with fuel compliance. And fuel compliance, I'm talking about idle fuel, percentage of idle time, following fuel routes. I mean, all the good stuff surrounded around fuel compliance. And then the unseated truck percent. Of course, there's many, many more, but the
Right.
unseated truck percent, keeping it under 3 to 5%. And the reason why you do,
Mhm.
if you look at idle fuel, I was just recently working with a carrier who will be watching this, and let's pretend that carrier had I don't know, on average, 9 hours of idle time per truck on average. If you're burning half a gallon of fuel at $3.50 a gallon, I'm making this number up, at 1,000 trucks, how much money did you spend when you idled 9 hours versus 7 hours?
Mhm.
How much money goes back to the bottom line? So knowing the details are definitely important.
All right, well, let's move on to the shop, which I know has been more of a hot topic around these here parts. We've been working with a lot of people on the diesel tech front. So same question that we've had for everyone. What's the most important thing for creating efficiency inside of your shop? Let's go with Joey first on this one.
Well-organized communication when we have trucks inbound to the yard. Specifically, if you're a carrier that has one yard, multiple trucks, but one major yard for repairs and things like that, the last thing you want to see is 100 trucks show up on Monday morning unexpected. So being able to communicate from operations to maintenance in a clear manner and scheduling that on the front end and not be reactive.
Yeah.
So having a game plan when the trucks are coming in and stick to that game plan.
I hear you. Scott, your turn. What would you say?
I gotta go ahead and hook my trailer to Joey when he talks
There you
about
go.
when he talks about communication. I'm going to take it over to the communication between whoever's at the red tag desk or whoever's at the shop and the driver, right? So when the driver comes in with his truck broke down, or he has a challenge or an opportunity that he needs to get his truck worked on, how do we communicate with that driver as a shop employee? Do we sound just like the ad that he read 3 months ago when he hired on? Right? Do we treat them with that same love and respect? And a lot of those successful companies do that. They make sure that the shop is clean and organized, and the red tagging of the truck or submitting your truck to the shop is seamless and frictionless. At times, in my experience, there might be some concerns sometimes at the shop, and the driver's complaints are usually, I have to take my truck back in for the same problem, for the same challenge that it had, or the truck was dirty when I got it back.
Right.
There might be something missing out of the truck, right? So identifying those pain points for the driver, focusing on tightening those up in the shop, will definitely improve that experience for the driver.
How important is it inside of the shop to build a good team of techs and mechanics around you?
It's super important. It's just like any other team.
Yeah.
Family, wherever you're working, whatever you're doing in life, now we have to have that team that's looking out for each other. Because if we don't have a cohesive team, if David, you're working on a truck and I red tagged your truck time, your time down as 8 o'clock in the morning, you walk away and go to lunch and I see something happen and we're not great team members, I should be able to pick up that slack and take off where you left off.
Yeah.
As simple as tools being laid around or just anything, a safety hazard, you're doing something unsafe. If we're a great team, I'm going to share that with you so that we stay safe and we get those trucks out of there in a timely manner.
Joey, what do you think the key is to building that team inside of the shop?
I think one of the biggest things building that team is making sure that the shop and every member of the shop knows that they're part of the entire team. It's not, it's the shop over there. They're part of the whole team. So being inclusive in everything that's done, or organizational functions, the shop is included. People from operations, recruiting, and safety are going out. They're interacting with the shop. They're out there. They're knowing what they're going through. We're offering advice to them on, hey, here's what the drivers are saying. So they want to be included and having that team mentality and that true family feel of, hey, we're part of it. We're not just out here in a shop, getting dirty and fixing the trucks to keep them going, but we're part of this well-oiled machine that is generating everything for this company and these drivers.
All righty. Well, we just moved through 3 departments pretty daggum fast. Hopefully daggum can be said. Maybe they can bleep me. But before we jump off of here And I know the audience found that very, very useful. I do want to give you each a chance to kind of summarize the entire episode and maybe take, 2 to 4 minutes there and just summarize kind of the whole idea of creating a more efficient fleet, a more synchronized fleet. And like you said, trust equals revenue. So working together, it all has revenue impact. So it's going to increase your operating ratio, it increases revenue at the fleet. It's just so incredibly important. So we will start with you, Joey. Give us just a quick summary rundown of what we've talked about so far.
All right, great. Well, it can't be stressed enough, one mission and one voice, and just having that from the first phone call from that driver to that recruiter, all the way through to when he's finally assigned his very first truck, through orientation, through the training process. Everyone has to be on the same page, singing the same song, giving the same message. There can't be contradicting messages, and they have to not just see it, but they have to feel it. So when you know that, and you know that every member of every department is thoroughly trained and has the knowledge from the very basic trucking 101, here's what a truck looks like, all the way through, this is how, the bottom dollar hits that bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Drivers know that. So when they have that trust, they have that confidence, drivers are going to stay, companies are going to be successful. One mission, one voice.
If we were doing it like around the horn where they were giving points, I would have hit you with like 2 or 3 points when you said they can't just see it, they got to feel it. That I was going in my head, I was adding points to your screen. All right, Scott, you get the final word here. Give us your summary of creating operational efficiency at your fleet.
Absolutely. So when you look at a fleet or a trucking company, this thing comes back to me from years ago, and he told me this person that actually built a pretty big trucking company. He says, Scott, there's 2 jobs in trucking, right? There's drivers and there's driver support. That's it. So that means recruiting, compliance, processing, operations. We're all here to support that driver. So having that synchronized message and that synchronized team and leadership is huge. And I'm going to touch again on the values of the organization, right? But a lot of folks, we tend to hire people that we feel are a good fit. And that's important, but we also want to hire people that are going to challenge us and push us to do things differently, right? So you want to hire, of course, the right people, make sure that your values are lined up with the vision your company has, and then your mission, why I do what I do. Is all aligned the same direction, and then focus again, not so much on those trucking IQ skill sets, but the actual trucking I care skill sets, the feeling, the compassion, the communication, the conflict resolution, self-awareness. That's huge. All the other stuff will come.
One time I called you before I had to present at Innovators in Arizona, and the thing you said to me is, everyone in the fleet is in recruiting. There's not a department that isn't part of recruiting. If you're in sales, you're in recruiting. If you're in operations, you're in recruiting. Everybody's in driver recruiting at a fleet.
Man, I tell you, David,
stuck with me.
This is how it is in recruiting, right? Retention starts in recruiting. Now it starts in the advertising, the marketing, right? But that's right. Recruiting. Retention starts in recruiting, but it doesn't end after orientation. You're auditioning every time you pick that phone up with that driver, where you walk by him at the shop, right? We're constantly auditioning to keep that relationship strong and loving.
Well, that may have been the best digging deeper we've ever done, but I think we got to end it here. We could go on forever, and there's more departments to talk about, and maybe we get the band back together and do it again. But that right there has been Digging Deeper. Don't ever know which episode it is. Which episode are we on? 8? I think we're on episode 8. Episode 8 of season 3. Big thank you to Joey, and a big thank you to Scott for coming on to us. We'll see you, everybody.